Well, hey there, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ben David, and today we're going to be talking a bit more about that Quad Cortex latency topic. First off, this is my live patch, and it sounds like that. So that's my live patch. Let's ping it. It has 221 samples of latency. I think that's around 4.7 milliseconds. Let me take a look at that, including analog ADDA difference. We're on 4.7 milliseconds of total latency, which is cool because that's under 5 milliseconds. Anything that's over 5 milliseconds, we don't want to have. What does the whole thing consist of? We have a wah. You just need a wah every once in a while. Then we have a legendary 87 compressor. Then we have a phaser for a little bit of modulation. I chose the MXR copy. The insert is interesting because it is not only an analog overdrive, because I personally think that analog overdrives sound a lot better than digital ones. It also has an analog delay. After that, we have a neural capture, and that's the neural capture of my Ref G20 purple. It's actually pretty low gain if you listen to it. Just learns to live with the overdrive, which is great because I think if you have a more like a lower gain lead sound, you can add a little bit more character from the individual overdrive that we're using. After that, there's a gate, and it's after the lead amp, mainly because I won't change the volume of the lead amp, but I might change the volume coming out of the analog send return. So in order to have like a constant gate, I'm using it after the capture. Then we have a Ref G20 white, which is like an almost clean, half clean version of my Ref amp. And then we have the cap. And then we're going multi-out. It's going out XLR1, XLR2, and also out 3 and 4. Out 3 is going back into in 2, as explained in the previous video. There we have a volume which actually defines how much signal is going into delay and reverb. Both of them are completely wet on 100%. I mix the reverb to the signal here in the end. On the delay side, we have a quarter note delay, then we have a flanger, then we have a pitch shifter. I switched them both with the C switch on the Quad Cortex. Then after that, we have a triplet delay. I think you can hear it. Without it. And now we have that galloping. And then we have a utility gain, which can be used to just switch it off. Okay. And then here we have the reverb, and there's also a chorus to be added. As you probably guessed, I'm using the whole board in hybrid mode. So A to D have pedal board switching functions like on stomp boxes. A switches the compressor, B switches the modulation, C switches those two guys here, and D activates or deactivates the delay. Then we have the actual scenes. Scene E is my rhythm sound. F is my lead sound. By the way, I define the volume here directly at the multi-out. So we have a 1.5 dB boost for the lead sound. When we're going from F to G, that neural capture gets deactivated. That one is activated, compressor is activated, and a little bit of modulation. But I'm also using different settings on that MXR clone. Okay, then the last one here on H, that's a hybrid scene. So we're having a little bit of modulation, we're having the distortion in, and the rev. So let's go over here and ping it over the USB line here. So it's 221 samples plus 5 for the difference to the ADDA measurement, clean measurement. We end up with a 4.7 millisecond patch, and that's pretty cool. In case you wanted to have a little bit of a lower latency, on that one I'm using the IR module instead of the cab module, even though I like the cab module a little bit more. But the cab module always has a built-in latency of 32 samples. So with that one, we have 32 samples less. Let's ping it. We're on 189 plus 5 by 48. So that's a 4.04 millisecond patch. And it also works, and else it has the same layout. As you can clearly see, all of the DSP module slots on row 1 are used up. And I was like, I got to get that signal somehow into row 3 and 4, and that's why I came up with that multi-out idea. By the way, if you want to do it like I do, you have to be a little bit more careful in those regards. About what you select. In case you wanted to use a global EQ, and I sometimes use it, just be sure that you only assign it to out 1, 2, and not to out 3, 4. Else the signal that's being fed back into DSP lanes 3 and 4 also has that EQ imprint. That's how I sometimes use it live. Just be careful of that, and also be careful that you got the volume settings right. We go into device settings, and there's the master volume knob assignment. As I'm just delivering mainly through out 1 and 2, just make sure you only have 1 and 2 and headphones ticked and not 3 and 4. Else you would just, when you turn it down, you would lower the volume, obviously, right? Those are the settings that you have to change if you want to use a patch like that. Just to tell you how it came to all of that DSP latency measurements, it was because I was playing with my other band in the rehearsal room, and I had a patch that I then measured to be like above 12 milliseconds because I was using both inserts and returns, which you shouldn't do. And I couldn't play anymore, or I felt like I couldn't play anymore. So I was like, I have to take a look at that. And then through the Neural Forum and other inputs that I found on the web, I came up with that measuring method. And the other thing is that when we're playing those bigger Murdock live concerts, I want to supply the front of house guy, the mixer, with a dry signal and a wet signal. So usually we're going out 1, multi-out 1 together for the wet signal, and out 2 with the dry signal. And then for those live recordings, I should also deliver a clean DI signal. And I'm doing that by going in 1 on lane 2 that I'm now using for the measurement, and then going out send 1, which delivers my dry clean signal of the guitar also to the recorder. But right now we want to use it for measurements in Logic. As I said, the difference between the USB latency and the analog AD to DA latency is 5 samples. So we're always going to add that one just as a reminder. And now we're going to take a look at things that people told me, and we're going to debunk those myths. So number 1, sometimes people ask me, why are you using an analog insert? And it's easy. It's like I can switch. So when I'm going to the clean sound, the insert send return is off. Of course, I could also use the overdrive ahead of the quad codecs, but that would mean a lot of tap dancing, and I don't want to do that. And the thing is, if you're using a quad codecs like I do, as in like seeing the DSP2 as like an individual effects processor that's also on your pedal board, and that actually works like one that you would have on your pedal board, meaning if you would have like an Eventide H90 or something like that, the latency would be in the same like 2 to 3 millisecond domain, right? So you're not actually giving up a lot of things when you're doing it that way. And the other reason is, let me show you this. I guess that's pretty important. I hope I don't forget to switch the output after that again. We're now going to an empty patch, right? And I'm setting up USB input 5, USB output 5 for the pinging. And I'm going to ping it here. And it's 84 samples, so it's 89 samples with the ADDA. And that's the empty patch. And the fun thing is, if I would go ahead and would just add any type of small, like just a low-cut, high-cut, small module to the lanes 3 and 4, as there is like a 64 sample buffer to transport the input data or the data to DSP2 and back. If I ping it now, and it's, you see it, that one's bypassed, right? I ping it, and we're at 148 samples, right? That is because lane 1 and 2, which are normally 84 samples DSP latency here with those logic measurements, or 89 samples in real life with the ADDA, they are latency compensated, which means now the unit knows that there is something going on in lane 3 and 4, which have that additional 64 sample buffer. So lanes 1 and 2 are being delayed by the same amount. Let's go back to my live patch, and I'm going to show you something that's also funny. Many people say like, hey, why don't you use a capture? Why do you use like a real overdrive pedal in the analog insert? And I'm like, well, number one, it sounds better, right? I can use different overdrive pedals and they all have their own character that they will add, more so than any digital version that's available. Let's just ping it again. We're at 221 samples. Now if I remove the insert from this lane and I put up a neural capture of my Earthquaker plumes, which actually sounds pretty good. What will happen is the latency just changes by 9 samples. Isn't that funny? Again, if I undo that, the insert send return has a fixed latency of 89 samples, which is ADDA and buffering, but still, for that patch, it just adds 9 samples, because all of that is happening in the, like I call it, in the shadow of the 64 samples added latency for row 3 and 4. And as long as the quad cortex doesn't know that all those lanes are connected the analog way, it just knows there's lane 3 and 4, so we have 64 samples, additional latency compensation delay applied to rows 1 and 2. That means we have like a lot of room to put things in. And that's why the insert doesn't weigh in that much. And of course, additional neural captures also require additional processing. Now, some people wrote like, you don't have to use that patch cord because you can route them internally. Let's try that out. And I'll just route this whole signal to row 3. And we're going to mix the delay and reverb now so they're not totally wet. And let's see how that sounds. We have to bypass that one. It's a bit more silent. We can better. It sounds pretty good, but once I ping it, we're on 285 samples. And that means we're operating at over 6 milliseconds now. That's the grim truth. Well, folks, that's it for tonight. I hope I could add some little insight into what's going on in the Quad Cortex and on my pedal board. I thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to have the best day ever. Bye!